Well, the wait is finally over. The Boston Celtics season is here. Now, Boston is looking to get back into the playoffs, and we welcome John Karalis, the host of our Locked On Celtics podcast, to break down every topic that we can think of heading into this season. John, I'm sure you're excited for this Celtics basketball season to get underway. How has the team been looking so far in preseason?
It's been kind of up and down. I think depending on what your perspective is, I think generally people are optimistic. The mistakes the Celtics have been making have generally, I think, been excusable due to them kind of learning Ime Udoka's new system. And they've had some injuries and guys out with COVID, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford out with COVID, a suspension to Marcus Smart. So they've been without the full team. So there's been a little bit of a continuity issue. But I think that when you get down to the core of what this team looks like, I'm pretty encouraged, and I like where they're going.
And you just mentioned it, Ime Udoka making his first head coaching stint here with the Boston Celtics. How would you expect this team to respond under him, with Brad Stevens now the president of basketball operations, a new look at the head coaching position? How do you think the guys are going to respond this year?
I think they're really bought in. You can tell that. I think the first sign that they were bought in was actually like the beginning of that first preseason game where they were passing the ball too much. Ime Udoka has stressed ball movement, and they were just passing, I think, for the sake of passing in some cases, saying, oh, he wants us to move the ball, so let's really move that ball. And they committed a few turnovers because of that. I think they're trying to find that happy medium, and that's going to take a little bit of time, especially, like I said, with Jaylen and Al out. They've really got to come back and get those reps. But I think everybody's bought into what Udoka is selling. Hopefully, however much of a step back that they took during the preseason without the full squad, they can make up for that pretty quickly because they open up with a bunch of games on the road. So they're going to have to really execute whatever he's trying to tell them to execute pretty well. Defensively, they're switching everything like to in crazy extent. So once they actually dial that back a little bit, we'll get a better sense of what they're doing.
And Celtics fans are used to seeing the core, the starting, rotation for the Celtics with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. What do you need to see from, Tatum and Brown, especially trying to make the next jump in their careers? Because we saw last year they were making progress. Jason Tatum looks like he's a linebacker with his shoulders right now. What are you expecting from those two this season?
Yeah, I think them becoming more facilitators is going to help a lot. Them trusting their teammates to do the right thing when they get the ball. And understand that sometimes when you pass the ball, you're going to end up getting it back. If you move the ball, you move yourself, and you relocate to a new spot, you cut, you do other things, that ball will find you again. And I think last season, because of various reasons, they didn't trust their teammates quite as much. The guys that they were out there on the floor with weren't really expected to be playing quite as much. So I think these teammates this season, I think, are a little bit more what they expect around them. The guys that were playing last season are settling back into maybe some reduced roles. So it might be a little bit easier for Tatum and Brown to kind of give the ball up. And hey, look, if somebody misses a pass and Tatum decides not to give the ball up, Udoka's going to get in his ear, because Udoka said, like, I want things this way, and I'm not going to sweep things under the rug when things go wrong. So Tatum and Brown, not just scoring, but facilitating, getting out there, getting the ball moving, and playing at that faster pace is going to be really, really important for their development. If they can each do it, then you're looking at Tatum becoming a potential MVP candidate. You're looking at Jaylen Brown being a much more solid all-star or better. So, possibly 2 all-NBA players on the Celtics if they take that next step forward.
And some new faces joining the roster this year, as well as some old friends coming back to the team with Al Horford. What do you make of all the offseason moves? Obviously we talked about what happened in the front office side of things, but on the roster itself, what did you think of all these moves?
Well, I mean, first, start with Brad Stevens moving upstairs. He seems to be really enjoying that role, and that opens things up for the new coach and a new voice and an opportunity to take a step forward. I think in some ways it was good timing for Stevens to kind of get out of a profession that he'd been doing for 20 plus years, and in giving the team an opportunity to move forward without having to really lose the voice in the locker room. You know, Brad was still had the team, but you know, it was getting close to the end. If they weren't able to kind of do it this year, that might have been Brad's last year anyway. So I think that starts there with a good move for the Celtics. And then as far as personnel goes, they've got Josh Richardson, who is going to be an interesting kind of case to see how much he can get back to the Miami days where he was really good and considered a six-man of the year candidate. So if they can get him back to that level, then they've really got something. But, you know, it's one of those reclamation projects. Him and Juancho Hernan-Gomez are guys that with ceilings that could be pretty high, but floors that could be pretty low. They bring in Dennis Schroeder for what's going to be a 1 year, I think, marriage for the Celtics. And he's really shown a lot this preseason. I actually think that Dennis Schroeder can be a six-man of the year candidate himself. This might be his best season coming up. So I think these additions to the Celtics are going to be very interesting. Could go a bunch of different ways. Al Horford is back, which is huge. He's playing well. He seems like he's found the fountain of youth in a lot of ways. That half the season off in Oklahoma City was great for him. So the Celtics do have a lot of good veteran additions that could be really good.
And hopefully that is what the Celtics need to jump up in the standings. If you've been following basketball for the last number of years, you know the Eastern Conference is pretty solid up top. What do the Celtics need to do to make that next jump and get maybe a potentially top 3 seed come playoff time?
Well, this is going to be an interesting season in the East because, you know, Milwaukee coming off their championship in a very short turnaround for them, they could slip a little bit just by not taking the beginning of the season too seriously and giving Giannis and Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday some extra time off, you know, playing them shorter stints. So their win total could be a little depressed. Who knows what's happening in Philly? So that leaves the Brooklyn Nets as your potential top seed. And there is an outside chance of one of these other East teams, Boston, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, being able to jump up into that third seed. Now, for them to get there, they really are going to have to share the ball. They are going to have to defend. I think this team, if they play their best, can be a top 5 defense. If they can get out into transition, if they can get out and score 4 or 5 easy buckets, just layups, then that will be a huge boost to their offense. Their offense is their weak point. So if they can get buckets in transition, then in the half court, just share the ball, move themselves, and really trust in one another and get some easy baskets just by exhausting the defense, then they can get themselves into a top 10 offense. If you got a top 5 defense and a top 10 offense, then you got a good chance at getting one of those top seeds.
It's a pretty good recipe for success, I should say. And another Eastern Conference team that's looking to make a jump this year is the New York Knicks. The Celtics and Knicks tip off the season against each other on Wednesday night. John, it's a pretty good early test, I would say, for this Boston team. What are you expecting here for Game 1 at Madison Square Garden?
Well, I think the Knicks are going to come out, you know, on fire. The Knicks do have an advantage here, not just by being home, but their continuity is much more together than Boston. So I'm looking to see if Jaylen Brown plays, then how much does he play? Can the Celtics kind of execute the plan without being too sloppy? That's going to be a real concern because they still won't have Al Horford, and they're going to rely on some young guys out there against a Tom Thibodeau defense. And against the Knicks team that's out there trying to run and get up and down the floor, the Celtics haven't been great defending in transition. So opening night in New York, Kemba Walker making his debut at home. I think there's going to be some emotions, a little bit of revenge for Kemba Walker as well. So I think this is going to be a tough game for the Celtics and really an early test, but an early important game because New York's going to be in the mix for a 3, 4, 5 seed as well. This could be, we could look back at the end of the season at this as a game the Celtics could need for a tiebreaker. So very important game, but I give the advantage to the Knicks right now only because I haven't seen the Celtics put it all together yet.
They haven't even tipped the ball off, and we're already talking about the playoffs. I love it. And, John, you've been following this team for years. What's something Celtics fans should know before that ball gets tipped off Wednesday night? What's kind of one thing you want to watch for this team?
Well, I mean, I want to watch the growth of the leaders, Tatum and Brown, how they grow as people. This is an interesting time for them because we are still tempted to call them the Celtics young stars, but they're just the Celtics stars now. They're 25 and 24. They're entering that next phase into their careers. And it kind of like time flies, like watching your kids grow up in a little way, because they're not the 19 and 20 and 21-year-olds that we're learning on the go. If they're going to grow into what fans and observers want them to grow into, then the Celtics have a chance at a championship. If they can't embrace this role, if they can't take the steps forward that we were talking about earlier, then the Celtics have to look at who a third star is that they can bring in. There's a potential for a 2-star and fitting players around those guys path to a championship. There's also a path where you have to trade some of these young guys that are filling in important gaps. Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, Peyton Pritchard. If you have to trade those guys away to get a third star, now you're hopefully getting some good chemistry, but you're thinning out your bench. So this is an important season for the Celtics to make that determination, to see where Tatum and Brown are in their development.
It will definitely be an exciting season from the Boston Garden, and John Karalis will be joining us throughout the year, giving us the latest insight all around this Boston Celtics team. And you can listen to his thoughts in more detail every day, as he is the host of our Locked On Celtics podcast. You can listen or download that wherever you get your podcast. John, thank you for giving us a few minutes today.
You got it. Anytime.